At my son's wedding, my daughter-in-law said, "You're not family anymore." I just smiled. Then she saw the gift table. Those words still echo in my mind, not because they hurt, but because of what happened next. What she didn't know was that I had been planning this moment for months, ever since I discovered what she and my son had been doing behind my back. What she couldn't have imagined was that her cruelty would be the final piece of evidence I needed to destroy the elaborate scheme they had built around my love for my family. My name is Margaret Eleanor Whitman, and at 64, I thought I understood my place in this world. I was the devoted mother who had raised 3 children alone after my husband died when they were young. David was 12, Emma was 10, and little Michael was only 6. I was the grandmother who babysat every weekend, who never missed a school play or soccer game. I was the woman who had worked 2 jobs, teaching high school English during the day and tutoring struggling students in the evenings, to put my eldest son, David, through law school. For 32 years, I had lived in the same modest 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, the one Richard and I had bought when we were newlyweds full of dreams. After he died in that car accident, I could have sold it, moved somewhere smaller, somewhere that didn't echo with memories. But it was home. It was where my children had taken their first steps, lost their first teeth, brought their first dates to meet me. This wedding was supposed to be the culmination of everything I had sacrificed for. David marrying Sarah, a woman I had welcomed into our family with open arms 18 months earlier. I had even offered to pay for half the wedding, $15,000 from my modest teacher's pension, money that represented years of careful budgeting, clipped coupons, and small sacrifices like skipping my annual vacation to the coast. But as I stood in that elegant ballroom at the Riverside Country Club, watching 200 guests celebrate what should have been our family's happiest day, I knew the truth that no one else did. This wasn't a celebration, it was a performance, and I was about to give the final act. The betrayal had started small, the way these things always do. Little comments from Sarah about how I was too involved in David's life. Suggestions that maybe I should give them space as a couple. At first, I thought she was just adjusting to being part of our close-knit family. The Whitmans had always been huggers, always been the type to drop by unannounced with casseroles and stay for hours talking around the kitchen table. "Maybe you could call before coming over," Sarah had suggested after I'd surprised them with David's favorite pot roast one Sunday evening. "We're trying to establish our own routines as a couple." I had tried to step back, thinking perhaps she was right. Maybe I was being overbearing. Maybe this was what modern relationships looked like. So I started calling first. Then I started waiting to be invited. Then the invitations became less frequent. The bigger slights followed. Family dinners where I wasn't invited. Holiday plans made without consulting me. When I asked David about Thanksgiving, he had shrugged and said, "Sarah thinks it's better if we start our own traditions, Mom. You understand." But I didn't understand, not until 3 months before the wedding, when I stopped by their apartment unannounced to drop off some of David's childhood photos I thought he might want. Pictures of him winning the state debate championship, graduating summa cum laude from college, the day he got his acceptance letter to law school. I used my key, the one David had given me for emergencies, the one he'd pressed into my hand saying, "You're the only person I trust completely, Mom," and walked into a conversation that shattered everything I thought I knew about my son. "Your mother is becoming a problem," Sarah was saying, her voice sharp with irritation. I could see her from the entryway, pacing their living room in her expensive yoga clothes, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. "She acts like she's still the most important woman in your life." "I know," David replied, and the casual agreement in his voice cut deeper than Sarah's complaints. He was sitting on their leather couch, the one I had helped them pick out, the one I had contributed $500 toward when they said they couldn't afford it. but she did pay for law school, and she's helping with the wedding. Exactly. She holds money over your head to control you. It's pathetic. I stood frozen in their entryway, my hand still on the doorknob, listening to my son. The boy I had rocked through nightmares about his father's death. The teenager I had driven to debate tournaments 3 hours away every weekend. The young man whose law school graduation had been the proudest day of my life. Reduce our relationship to a financial transaction. After the wedding, Sarah continued, we need to cut the cord completely. No more Sunday dinners, no more dropping by, no more treating her like she's part of our nuclear family. She's extended family now, and she needs to learn her place. Extended family. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had raised this boy, sacrificed everything for him, and now I was being relegated to the same category as distant cousins, seen only at funerals. What about the money she's giving us for the house down payment? David asked. My blood ran cold. What money for a house down payment? I had never promised them money for a house. I was already stretching my budget to help with the wedding. Oh, she doesn't know about that yet, Sarah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. But she will. I've already told your grandmother that your mother promised us $50,000 for a house. Grandma Rose was so excited to help her dear Margaret make her son's dreams come true. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from gasping. My mother-in-law, Rose, was 89 and had been showing signs of confusion lately. Small things, forgetting names, repeating stories, sometimes calling me by her deceased daughter's name. But she adored me, always had, ever since the day David brought me home to meet his parents 35 years ago. If Sarah had told her I needed money for David, Sarah, that's... David's voice trailed off, and I could hear the uncertainty in it. That's what? Smart? Your grandmother has more money than she knows what to do with, and she's not going to live forever. This way, the money stays in the family, and your mother gets the credit for being generous. Everyone wins. Except my mother doesn't know she's supposedly giving us $50,000. She will when Grandma Rose calls to coordinate the gift. And what's she going to do then? Tell an 89-year-old woman that she lied? Disappoint her beloved grandson? She'll pay up, and then we'll have our house and our freedom. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. They weren't just planning to cut me out of their lives. They were planning to steal from Rose, using my name and my relationship with David as the weapon. They were counting on my love for both of them to make me complicit in elder abuse. I backed out of the apartment silently, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key in the lock. In my car, I sat for 20 minutes, trying to process what I had heard. This was my son, the child I had devoted my life to raising. This was the woman I had welcomed as a daughter, the one I had spent hours helping plan her dream wedding. That night, I sat in my small kitchen, staring at my phone. The same kitchen where David had done his homework every night, where I had helped him practice his closing arguments for mock trial, where he had told me about Sarah and how much he loved her. Sure enough, there was a voicemail from Rose, her voice bright with excitement. Margaret, dear, I'm so proud of you for helping David and Sarah with their house. $50,000 is so generous. I want to contribute too. I'm thinking another $50,000? We can present it together at the wedding as a surprise. Call me back, sweetheart. My hands trembled as I saved the message. Rose's voice sounded so happy, so proud of what she thought was my generosity. She had no idea she was being manipulated by her own grandson. Then I did something I had never done before in my life. I started investigating my own son. I began with their finances. David had always been careless about leaving documents around, a habit that had driven me crazy when he was in high school and college. I still had a key to their apartment, and I knew their schedules. David worked at Morrison and Associates downtown, usually leaving by 7:30 a.m. and not returning until after 6 p.m. Sarah worked part-time at a boutique marketing firm, but she spent most afternoons at yoga classes or meeting friends for lunch. Over the next few weeks, I made careful visits when I knew they were at work. I felt like a criminal sneaking into my own son's home, but I had to know the truth. I photographed bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications. What I found was worse than I had imagined. They weren't just planning to take money from Rose and me for a house. They had already been living beyond their means for months, running up credit card debt on designer clothes, expensive dinners, weekend trips to wine country. Sarah's engagement ring alone had cost $8,000, money they had borrowed against David's future earnings. The wedding itself was being funded by a combination of my contribution, $20,000 from Sarah's parents, and a personal loan for $15,000 that they had no realistic way to repay. Their monthly expenses exceeded their income by nearly $2,000, and they were already 3 months behind on their car payments. But the most damning discovery came when I found a folder labeled Estate Planning hidden in David's desk drawer. Inside were printouts of articles about elder financial abuse, notes about Rose's assets, and a timeline that made my blood run cold. They had been researching Rose's finances for months. They knew about her investment accounts, her life insurance policies, her property holdings. They had even looked into the legal requirements for power of attorney in cases of diminished mental capacity. There were notes in David's handwriting about documenting cognitive decline and establishing financial necessity. They weren't just planning to steal $50,000. They were planning to take everything, using Rose's growing confusion and my relationship with both of them as their cover. I photographed everything, my teacher's instincts for documentation serving me well. Then I made copies and stored them in a safety deposit box I opened specifically for this purpose. But I needed more than financial records. I needed proof of their intentions, their actual words. So I did something that went against every moral fiber of my being, but which I knew was necessary. I bought a small digital recorder from an electronics store, paying cash and wearing sunglasses like some kind of spy. The young clerk probably thought I was a paranoid old woman, but I didn't care. The next Sunday, when they invited me for dinner, one of their increasingly rare gestures of inclusion, I wore the recorder in my jacket pocket. My hands shook as I activated it, but I forced myself to stay calm, to play the role of the loving, unsuspecting mother. The conversation I captured that night was everything I needed and more. I talked to that lawyer about Grandma Rose, Sarah said as she served dessert, a store-bought cheesecake she had tried to pass off as homemade. He says if we can document her mental decline, getting power of attorney should be straightforward. Are you sure about this? David asked, but his tone was more concerned about getting caught than about the ethics of what they were planning. David, your grandmother is sitting on over $2 million in assets. She's 89 years old and starting to forget things. Would you rather see that money go to some nursing home, or would you rather it stay in the family? $2 million. I had known Rose was comfortable, but I had no idea she was wealthy. She lived modestly in the same house she and David's grandfather had bought 50 years ago, drove a 10-year-old Buick, shopped with coupons. She had never flaunted her wealth, never made anyone feel uncomfortable about money. But my mom, David started. Your mother will be fine. She has her pension, her little house. She doesn't need millions of dollars. Besides, once we have power of attorney, we can make sure she's taken care of too. Everyone wins. Except, I realized, listening to them plan my future like I was already dead, everyone didn't win. In their version of the story, I became a dependent, someone to be taken care of, rather than someone with agency and dignity. They were planning to steal from Rose, manipulate me into compliance, and then manage my life according to their preferences. "What about Emma and Michael?" David asked, referring to his siblings. "They're going to expect something from Grandma's estate." "That's why we need to move quickly," Sarah replied. "Once we have power of attorney, we can restructure her assets, set up trusts, make strategic gifts. By the time she dies, there won't be much left for anyone to fight over." I almost gasped aloud. They weren't just planning to steal from Rose while she was alive. They were planning to disinherit my other children, David's own brother and sister. "Emma's always been jealous of you anyway," Sarah continued, "and Michael is too busy with his art to pay attention to family finances. They'll never know what hit them." That night I went home and made a decision. If they wanted to play games with family money, I would show them how the game was really played. But first, I needed allies. The next morning, I called Rose and asked if I could come visit. She was delighted, as always, and when I arrived at her beautiful Victorian home on Elm Street, she greeted me with her usual warmth. The house smelled like lavender and old books, the same way it had when David's grandfather was alive. "Margaret, dear, I was just thinking about you. Are you excited about the wedding and about surprising David and Sarah with the house money?" I sat down beside her on her antique sofa, the same one where David had curled up as a child, listening to his grandmother's stories. I took her soft, wrinkled hands in mine, noting how fragile they felt, how vulnerable she seemed. "Rose, I need to tell you something important, and I need you to listen carefully." Over the next hour, I played the recordings for her. I showed her the photographs of the documents I had found. I watched her face change from confusion to disbelief to a cold anger I had never seen in my gentle mother-in-law. "They think I'm a foolish old woman," she said finally, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "They think we both are," I replied. Rose was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at her garden where David had played as a child, where she had taught him to plant tomatoes and pull weeds. Then she turned to me with a smile that reminded me exactly where David had gotten his intelligence and his capacity for strategic thinking. "Well then," she said, "I suppose we should let them continue thinking that, at least until the wedding." What followed were the most intense 3 weeks of my life. Rose, despite her age and occasional confusion about small details, proved to have a mind like a steel trap when it came to protecting her family and her assets. She called her lawyer, not the one Sarah had consulted, but Harold Brennan, the man who had been handling her affairs for 30 years. Harold was a distinguished gentleman in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When Rose and I met with him in his oak-paneled office, he listened to our story with growing concern and anger. "Mrs. Whitman," he said to me, "what you're describing is textbook elder financial abuse. If your son and his fiancée had succeeded in this scheme, they could have faced serious criminal charges." Together, we crafted a plan that was both elegant and devastating. First, Rose changed her will. David, who had been set to inherit the bulk of her estate, was reduced to a token amount, $10,000, enough to show that he hadn't been forgotten, but not enough to matter. The majority of her assets would now go to my other 2 children, Emma and Michael, and to several charities she had always supported: the local library, the animal shelter, and a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. Second, she transferred $100,000 into my name, with instructions that it be used for Margaret's discretion in family matters. This wasn't the money they were expecting. This was my war chest, my insurance policy against whatever retaliation might come. Third, and most importantly, she agreed to play along with their scheme, but with a twist they would never see coming. But I wasn't finished. I had my own preparations to make. I called my other two children and told them everything. Emma, now 32 and a successful nurse practitioner, was horrified but not entirely surprised. David's always been selfish, she said, but I never thought he'd stoop to this. Michael, 28 and a struggling artist living in Portland, was more shocked. Are you sure, Mom? This doesn't sound like David. I have recordings, Michael. I have documents. I wish I were wrong. Both of them agreed to attend the wedding and to support whatever plan Rose and I had developed. They also agreed to say nothing to David about what they knew. I also reached out to David's law school dean, Professor Martinez, who had always been fond of David and had written his recommendation letters. I didn't tell him everything, but I mentioned that there might be some concerning developments regarding David's character that could reflect poorly on the law school. Professor Martinez agreed to attend the wedding as my guest. The week before the wedding, Rose called David and Sarah, her voice perfectly calibrated to sound slightly confused but generous. David, dear, I've been thinking about this house money. Margaret and I want to make it a proper wedding gift, something special. Why don't we present it at the reception, in front of everyone? I think it would be lovely to announce it publicly, don't you? I could hear Sarah's excitement through the phone when David called to tell me about Rose's idea. They thought they had manipulated a confused old woman into giving them a public platform for their theft. They had no idea what was actually coming. That sounds wonderful, I told David, my voice warm with maternal pride. I'm so happy we can do this for you. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The teenager who had cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart, the young man who had called me every day during his first year of law school because he was homesick. Where had I gone wrong? How had I raised a son who could plan to steal from his own grandmother? But then I thought about Emma, who spent her weekends volunteering at a free clinic. About Michael, who taught art classes to underprivileged kids despite barely making ends meet himself. I had raised 3 children with the same values, the same love. 2 of them had become good people. David had made his own choices. The wedding day arrived with perfect spring weather. The ceremony was beautiful, held in the garden of the Riverside Country Club, with white roses and baby's breath everywhere. David looked handsome in his black tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile confident and bright. Sarah was radiant in her designer gown, a $3,000 dress that I now knew they couldn't afford. Her blonde hair swept up in an elegant chignon, her makeup flawless. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have been the proudest mother in the world. Instead, I sat in the front row wearing my best dress, a navy blue silk that I had bought specifically for this occasion, and my most serene smile, waiting. The ceremony itself was traditional, with Sarah's pastor officiating. When they exchanged vows, David's voice was strong and clear. I promise to love you, honor you, and protect you for all the days of my life. Sarah's response was equally confident. I promise to stand by your side through whatever challenges we may face. I wondered if they considered elder abuse and fraud to be among those challenges they would face together. The reception was everything Sarah had dreamed of. Elegant centerpieces with white orchids and silver accents, a live jazz band, a menu that included filet mignon and lobster tail, a meal that had cost more than I made in 3 months. The ballroom was decorated in white and silver, with twinkling lights and flowing fabric that made everything look like a fairy tale. I watched Sarah work the room, accepting congratulations, playing the perfect bride. She had changed into a second dress for the reception, a shorter, more modern design that showed off her figure. She moved with confidence, clearly in her element, clearly believing that everything was going according to plan. I waited. During the cocktail hour, I mingled with the guests, many of whom I had known for years: David's law school friends, colleagues from his firm, neighbors from our old street who had watched him grow up. Everyone was so happy, so excited for the young couple's future. "You must be so proud," said Mrs. Henderson, who had lived next door to us for 20 years. "David has turned out so well." "Yes," I replied, "he certainly has shown his true character." During dinner, I sat at the family table with Rose, Emma, Michael, and Sarah's parents. Rose looked elegant in her burgundy dress, her silver hair perfectly styled, her jewelry understated but expensive. She caught my eye several times during the meal, and each time she gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. Sarah's parents, Janet and Robert, were lovely people who clearly adored their daughter. They had no idea what she was capable of, what she had planned. I felt sorry for them, knowing that they were about to learn something terrible about the child they had raised. "Margaret," Janet said to me during the salad course, "Sarah tells us you and Rose are planning a special surprise for the couple. How exciting!" "Yes," I replied. "It's something we've been planning for quite some time. I think everyone will be very surprised." As the dinner plates were cleared away, I noticed David and Sarah exchanging glances. They were clearly anticipating the moment when Rose and I would announce our gift. Sarah's eyes were bright with excitement, and David kept checking his watch. The band finished their set, and the DJ took over for dancing. The first dance was to "At Last" by Etta James, and David and Sarah moved together beautifully, clearly having taken lessons. They looked like the perfect couple, young and beautiful and in love. But I knew better after the first dance, the father-daughter dance, and the mother-son dance, during which David whispered, "Thank you for everything, Mom. I love you so much." It was time for speeches. Sarah's father spoke first, welcoming David to their family and expressing his joy at seeing his daughter so happy. David's best man, his law school roommate, told funny stories about their college days and toasted the couple's future. Then Rose caught my eye from across the room and nodded slightly. It was time. I stood up and gently tapped my champagne glass with a fork. The room gradually quieted, all eyes turning to me. The band stopped playing, and even the waitstaff paused in their duties. "If I could have everyone's attention," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "I know it's traditional for the father of the bride to make a speech, but as the mother of the groom, I hope you'll indulge me for just a moment." David smiled at me from the head table, probably thinking I was about to embarrass myself with some sentimental mother of the groom speech. Sarah's smile was more forced, but she nodded encouragingly. She was clearly eager to get to the part where Rose and I announced our generous gift. "David," I continued, looking directly at my son, "you have always been such a clever boy. Even as a child, you could figure out the most complex puzzles, find solutions that no one else could see." Murmurs of agreement from family members who remembered David's academic achievements, his debate team victories, his acceptance to law school. "You won the state championship in debate when you were 16. You graduated summa cum laude from college. You finished in the top 10% of your law school class." David's smile widened, clearly enjoying the public praise. "And Sarah," I turned to my daughter-in-law, "you have such a gift for planning, for seeing opportunities that others might miss. You've shown remarkable creativity in finding ways to achieve your goals." Sarah's smile widened, clearly thinking this was going in a direction she liked. "So, I know you'll both appreciate the gift that Rose and I have prepared for you. It's something that reflects exactly the kind of people you've shown yourselves to be." I gestured to Rose, who stood up with the help of her cane, moving slowly but deliberately to the front of the room. In her hands was an elegant envelope, cream-colored with gold trim. "Grandma Rose and I have been talking," I continued, "about family, about legacy, about what it means to take care of the people we love. We've been discussing the importance of honesty, of integrity, of treating our elders with respect and dignity. The room was completely silent now. Everyone focused on what they assumed would be the announcement of a generous monetary gift. I could see David and Sarah leaning forward slightly, their eyes fixed on the envelope in Rose's hands. "Rose, would you like to do the honors?" My mother-in-law stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, with none of the confusion that David and Sarah had been counting on. "David and Sarah," she began, "Margaret and I have indeed prepared a special gift for you. It's something that reflects exactly what you've given to this family." She opened the envelope and withdrew a single sheet of paper, holding it up so everyone could see. "This is a receipt," she announced, "for a $100,000 donation made in your names to the National Center on Elder Abuse." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched the color drain from David's face, saw Sarah's mouth fall open in shock. Around the room, guests began to murmur, clearly confused by this unexpected turn. "You see," Rose continued, her voice gaining strength, "we know about your plans for my money. We know about the power of attorney scheme. We know about the lies you told about Margaret promising you $50,000 for a house." A ripple of shocked whispers ran through the crowd. Sarah's parents looked confused and horrified. David's law school friends were staring in disbelief. Professor Martinez, sitting at a nearby table, was leaning forward with intense interest. "We thought," I said, taking over from Rose, "that the most appropriate wedding gift would be to ensure that other elderly people don't fall victim to the kind of financial abuse you were planning." Sarah found her voice first, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I don't know what you think you heard, but—" "Oh, we don't think we heard anything," I interrupted gently. "We know exactly what we heard." I reached into my purse and withdrew the small digital recorder, the same one I had used to capture their conversations. I held it up so everyone could see it. "Would you like me to play the recording where you discuss stealing from a confused 89-year-old woman? Or perhaps the one where you plan to disinherit David's brother and sister?" The reaction was immediate and devastating. Gasps of horror from the guests, Sarah's mother covering her mouth in shock, David's law school dean looking like he had swallowed something bitter. But I wasn't finished. I pressed play on the recorder, and Sarah's voice filled the ballroom, crystal clear and unmistakably cruel. "Your grandmother is sitting on over $2 million in assets. She's 89 years old and starting to forget things. Would you rather see that money go to some nursing home, or would you rather it stay in the family?" The silence was absolute. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, frozen in place by the shocking revelation. Then David's voice, equally clear, "What about my mom?" And Sarah's response, "Your mother will be fine. She has her pension, her little house. She doesn't need millions of dollars. Besides, once we have power of attorney, we can make sure she's taken care of too." I stopped the recording and looked around the room at the faces of people who had known David since he was a child, who had celebrated his achievements, who had believed in his character. "David," I said, my voice still calm, still controlled, "you asked me once what I would do if I found out someone was trying to steal from our family. Do you remember what I told you?" He stared at me, his face white as his shirt, his hands trembling slightly. "I told you that I would make sure they never had the opportunity to hurt anyone else." I turned to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting this celebration, but I felt it was important that you all understand exactly who you're celebrating today." Sarah finally exploded, her composure completely shattered. "You bitter old woman, you can't stand that David chose me over you. You're jealous and pathetic and—" She stood up, her face twisted with rage. You're not family anymore. You're just a sad, lonely old woman who can't let go. The words hung in the air like a slap. Around the room, people shifted uncomfortably, clearly appalled by Sarah's outburst. Sarah, Rose's voice cut through her tirade like a blade. You're quite right. Margaret is no longer your family. As of today, neither are you. The old woman's eyes were steel as she looked at her grandson. David, you are my grandson, and I will always love you. But you are no longer my heir. The lawyers have already filed the paperwork. David found his voice at last, standing up on shaky legs. Grandma, you can't. You're not thinking clearly. Sarah's right. You're confused. Oh, my dear boy, Rose smiled sadly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Your mother helped me see that. She turned to me, and in front of 200 people, she said the words that I will treasure for the rest of my life. Margaret, you are the daughter I never had. You are the woman who raised my grandson to be better than this, even though he chose not to be. You are family in every way that matters. Then she looked back at David and Sarah, her voice becoming cold and final. You two are strangers who happen to share my blood. Professor Martinez stood up from his table, his face grave. David, I think we need to have a conversation about your standing at the law school. This kind of behavior reflects poorly on our institution and raises serious questions about your fitness to practice law. Sarah's father, Robert, was staring at his daughter in horror. Sarah, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you weren't really planning to steal from an elderly woman. But Sarah was beyond rational response. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit, her wedding dress trailing behind her. This is insane. You're all insane. David, are you coming or not? David looked around the room at the faces of everyone he had ever known, everyone who had ever believed in him, his law school friends, his colleagues, his family. Then he looked at me, and for a moment I saw the little boy he used to be, confused and scared and looking for someone to tell him what to do. Mom, he said quietly, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are, I replied. But sorry doesn't undo what you plan to do to Rose. Sorry doesn't erase the months you spent researching how to steal from a confused old woman. He stood there for another moment, then followed Sarah out of the ballroom, leaving behind 200 guests, thousands of dollars in unpaid wedding expenses, and the ruins of his reputation. The reception ended in chaos, of course. Guests left in shocked whispers, many stopping to express their support for Rose and me. Sarah's parents stayed behind to apologize profusely and to arrange payment for the wedding expenses that David and Sarah couldn't cover. Several of David's colleagues approached me privately to express their horror at what they had witnessed and their support for my actions. Emma and Michael flanked me as we left the country club, both of them still processing what they had seen. I can't believe he was going to steal from Grandma Rose, Emma said, shaking her head. And cut us out of the inheritance too. I keep thinking there must be some explanation, Michael added. Some way this isn't as bad as it seems. There isn't, I told them both. I wish there were, but there isn't. Rose rode home with us, exhausted but satisfied. I'm proud of you, Margaret, she said as we helped her into her house. You did what needed to be done. But the most important moment came 3 hours later, when I was finally alone in my small house, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of tea and the weight of the day settling around me. The same kitchen where David had done his homework, where I had helped him practice for debates, where he had told me about his dreams of becoming a lawyer and making a difference in the world. My phone rang. It was David. Mom, he said, and his voice was broken in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are, I replied, but sorry doesn't undo what you planned to do to Rose. Sorry doesn't erase the months you spent researching how to steal from a confused old woman. I never meant for it to go that far. Sarah, she made it sound so reasonable. David, I interrupted gently, you're a lawyer. You know the difference between right and wrong. You chose wrong, and you chose it repeatedly, for months. There was a long silence. Then, what happens now? Now you live with the consequences of your choices. You figure out how to pay for this wedding and your debts without stealing from elderly relatives. You decide what kind of man you want to be going forward. And us? Our relationship? I looked around my small, comfortable kitchen, at the photos of my children on the refrigerator, at the life I had built through decades of hard work and sacrifice. On the counter was the program from the wedding, with David and Sarah's smiling faces on the cover. I picked it up and dropped it in the trash. That depends entirely on you, I said. The door is always open for the son I raised, but it's closed forever to the man who tried to steal from his grandmother. Over the following weeks, the fallout continued. The story spread through David's law firm, and he was quietly asked to resign. Professor Martinez launched an investigation into David's conduct, which resulted in a formal reprimand on his academic record. Sarah's boutique marketing firm let her go after clients began canceling their contracts. The financial pressure was immediate and severe. Without David's income, they couldn't make their loan payments or cover their credit card debt. The expensive apartment had to be given up, the designer furniture sold. Sarah's engagement ring went to a pawn shop. 6 months later, David and Sarah divorced. The financial pressure of their debts, combined with the social fallout from the wedding, proved too much for their relationship. Sarah moved across the country to live with a college friend, while David moved into a studio apartment across town. But the story wasn't over. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, David appeared at my door. He looked different, thinner, older, humbled in a way I had never seen before. He was wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, a far cry from the expensive suits he used to favor. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" I let him in, made coffee, and we sat at the same kitchen table where we had shared thousands of meals over the years. "I've been going to therapy," he said without preamble, "trying to understand how I became the kind of person who would plan to steal from his own grandmother." I waited, saying nothing. "The therapist says I got caught up in Sarah's vision of success, her need for status and material things. But that's not an excuse. I made my own choices." "Yes, you did. I want to make amends." "I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to try to make it right." Over the next hour, he outlined a plan he had developed. He had taken a job with a legal aid clinic, helping low-income clients with basic legal needs. The pay was a fraction of what he had made at the corporate firm, but it was honest work. He had also volunteered to speak at elder abuse prevention seminars, sharing his story as a cautionary tale. "I know you probably don't believe me," he said, "but I want to be the man you raised me to be. I want to earn back your trust and Grandma Rose's trust, even if it takes the rest of my life." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, of the calculating person he had become. But all I saw was genuine remorse and a determination to change. "It's going to take time," I told him. "A lot of time." "I know, I'm prepared for that." Rose, when I told her about David's visit, was cautiously optimistic. "People can change," she said. "Look at you. You found strength you didn't know you had. Maybe David can find the goodness he lost." Slowly, carefully, David began the work of rebuilding his relationship with our family. He visited Rose every week, helping with yard work and household repairs, never asking for anything in return. He attended Emma's nursing school graduation and Michael's first art show, celebrating their achievements without trying to make it about himself. It took 2 years, But eventually, Rose changed her will again, leaving David a modest inheritance, not the millions he had once expected, but enough to show that she had forgiven him. The bulk of her estate still went to Emma, Michael, and Charity, but David was no longer completely disinherited. Rose lived for 3 more years after the wedding, sharp and fierce until the end. She spent her final months working with elder abuse prevention organizations, using her story to help protect other vulnerable seniors. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at age 92, she left me her house and enough money to ensure I would never have to depend on anyone again. But more than that, she left me with the knowledge that I had found my voice when it mattered most, that I had stood up not just for myself, but for every elderly person who had ever been seen as a target rather than a treasure. The funeral was small and dignified, held at the same church where David and Sarah had been married 3 years earlier. David spoke beautifully about his grandmother, acknowledging his mistakes and expressing gratitude for her forgiveness. Emma and Michael shared memories of their grandmother's kindness and wisdom. I spoke last, talking about Rose's strength, her dignity, and her unwavering commitment to protecting her family. After the service, as we stood in the cemetery where Rose was laid to rest beside her husband, David approached me. "Mom," he said, "I know I can never fully make up for what I did, but I want you to know that you saved me. If you hadn't exposed what I was planning, I would have become someone I couldn't live with." I looked at my son, older now, wiser, humbled by his experiences, and saw glimpses of the boy I had raised. "You saved yourself," I told him. "I just gave you the opportunity to see who you were becoming." As we walked away from the cemetery together, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The betrayal, the investigation, the confrontation, the long road to redemption. It had been painful, devastating at times, but it had also revealed truths that needed to be revealed. They had thought they could manipulate me because I was quiet, because I was accommodating, because I had spent my life putting others first. They mistook kindness for weakness, generosity for gullibility. They were wrong. The gift table at that wedding had held only one present that mattered: the gift of truth, delivered at exactly the right moment to exactly the right audience. It wasn't wrapped in pretty paper or tied with a bow, but it was the most valuable thing I could have given my son: the chance to see himself clearly and choose to be better. Some gifts change everything. This one certainly did. Today, 5 years later, David works as a public defender, representing clients who can't afford private attorneys. He's remarried to a kind, honest woman named Lisa, who works as a social worker. They live modestly, drive used cars, and volunteer at the local food bank on weekends. Emma is now a nurse practitioner specializing in geriatric care, inspired partly by what happened with Rose. Michael's art has begun to gain recognition, and he recently had his first solo show in a Portland gallery. I still live in my small house on Maple Street, but now it's mortgage-free thanks to Rose's generosity. I volunteer at the library, teach literacy classes to adults, and serve on the board of the local elder abuse prevention organization that Rose helped establish. The house is often full of grandchildren now. Emma has 2 daughters, and David and Lisa have a son. When they visit, we sit around the same kitchen table where David once did his homework, where I confronted him about his betrayal, where we began the long process of rebuilding our relationship. Sometimes, when I'm watching my grandchildren play in the backyard, I think about that wedding day and the choice I made to speak the truth, no matter how painful it was. I think about Rose's courage in standing up to her own grandson, about the strength we found in each other when we needed it most. They thought they broke me when they planned to steal from Rose, when they dismissed me as extended family, when they tried to manipulate my love for them into compliance with their scheme. All they did was remind me how strong I've always been. If this story spoke to your heart, thank you for being here. Tell me, what would you have done in her place? Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and keep your voice.